Struggling. Single dad. Fixed a stranger's car for free. She was the heiress of a luxury fashion empire. The rain wasn't just falling, it was drumming steady and relentless on the corrugated roof of Carter's auto. Ethan Carter had just flicked off the lights, locking the cash register and wiping the black grease from his hands with an old shop rag that had seen better days. Outside, the street lamps cast pale halos through the downpour, and the puddles reflected the occasional passing car like fragments of liquid glass. He was halfway to the back door when the sound came, an uneven cough and sputter of an engine, followed by the unmistakable whine of a vehicle struggling for life. Through the haze of rain, a sleek black sports car appeared, its headlights cutting across the empty lot. It rolled forward with an expensive kind of grace, even in distress, before coming to a jerking stop near the garage bay. Ethan hesitated. It was after hours. Lily was at home, probably flipping through her math homework and waiting for him to heat up leftover soup. But then the driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She wasn't the kind of customer who usually showed up at Carter's auto. Her coat was camel wool, tailored within an inch of perfection. Diamonds caught the light with every flick of her wrist. Her hair, dark sleek, was pulled into a low knot that somehow remained untouched by the rain. She looked around, clearly taking in the humble garage with its peeling paint and smell of motor oil before her eyes landed on him. "Are you open?" Her voice was rich, confident, but there was a thread of tension in it. "Closed, technically," Ethan said, running a hand over the back of his neck. "But what's wrong with it? It just died. Right in the middle of the road." "I was lucky to coast in here," she replied, gesturing toward the car. "I have somewhere important to be." He nodded toward the bay door. "Pull it in. I'll take a look." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Thank you." The sports car's engine complained as she moved it forward, but Ethan waved her into position. Within minutes, he was leaning over the open hood flashlight, balanced between his fingers. The rain softened to a mist, tapping against the concrete outside. "You're headed somewhere fancy," he remarked, glancing at her gown peeking from beneath her coat. "A charity gala," she said. "Fashion industry thing. My family's involved." He only hummed in response, focusing on the engine. Loose connection. Maybe a faulty alternator. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to leave her stranded. "You'll make it," he said, tightening the last bolt. "Give me a second to run a quick test." She watched him, her eyes lingering on the worn denim of his shirt sleeves, the way his hands moved with unhurried precision. There was no slick sales pitch, no suggestion she upgrade a part she didn't need. The engine roared back to life, smooth as glass. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "How much do I owe you?" Ethan shook his head. "No charge." Her brows knit. "No charge." "It was a quick fix," he said, wiping his hands. "Besides, I'm just glad to help." She stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." "Ethan Carter." "Isabella," she said, offering her hand. He took it, and for a moment neither of them pulled away. Outside, the rain began to fade, leaving only the sound of the engine purring between them. She climbed back into her car, and with one last glance at him through the window, pulled out into the night. Ethan stood in the doorway long after the taillights disappeared. The next evening at home, Lily was curled on the couch with her sketchbook drawing in pencil. She looked up as he came, in her smile instant. "You're late," she said, tilting her head. "Had a customer." "After hours," he replied, hanging up his jacket. "Fancy car. Fancy lady." Lily grinned. Was she nice? Ethan thought of the way Isabella had looked at him, curious, almost startled. Yeah, she was nice. They ate reheated soup together, the conversation drifting to school and the upcoming town fair. Yet in the back of his mind, the image of Isabella stepping into the rain stayed vivid. He couldn't place why. 3 days later, she returned. The sports car slid to a stop outside just after lunch, the sun high and bright this time. Ethan looked up from under a pickup truck, squinting against the light. "Car trouble again?" he asked as she stepped out. She smiled, a real one this time. "Routine checkup, or at least that's my excuse." He raised an eyebrow. "And the real reason I was in the neighborhood," she said, glancing around the garage. "Thought I'd stop by." Lily, off from school for the day, was sitting at the counter with a paperback novel. Isabella's eyes lit up when she saw her. "You must be Lily," she said warmly. Lily nodded, a little shy. "You're the fancy car lady." Isabella laughed, not offended in the slightest. Guilty. They talked while Ethan worked, the two of them finding an easy rhythm. Isabella asked Lily about her favorite books, and before long the little girl was chatting about everything from art to the best milkshakes in town. When Isabella left that day, she promised to stop by again. Ethan watched her drive away, feeling the faint, unfamiliar tug of anticipation. It would be weeks before he learned the truth that the woman who leaned so casually against his workbench and laughed with his daughter was the heiress to one of the biggest fashion empires in the country. But by then, it would already be too late to keep his heart out of it. The next week, the sound of that black sports car became oddly familiar. It wasn't loud, its engine purred more than roared, but whenever it turned the corner into Carter's auto, Ethan found himself straightening up a little, almost against his will. Isabella's checkups became a running joke between them. She would glide in wearing something effortlessly elegant, claiming to hear a strange noise or notice a tiny vibration. Ethan would poke around under the hood, knowing full well the car was fine, while she leaned nearby, asking about the town, the garage, or Lily. Sometimes she brought coffee, always one for him, one for Lily, who she seemed to have taken under her wing. The girl usually guarded with strangers lit up around Isabella. One afternoon, Isabella arrived with a paper bag in hand. "Peace offering," she said, placing it on his workbench. Ethan peered inside. "Apple fritters." She grinned. "Lily mentioned you liked them." He frowned in mock suspicion. "You bribing me now?" Maybe, she said, unbothered, "but if it works." That day, Lily came by after school, and the three of them ended up sitting on the garage steps sharing pastries while the late autumn sun slanted across the street. "So what about you?" Ethan asked. "What do you actually do?" Isabella hesitated. "I work in fashion. Sort of. I consult," she said vaguely, then quickly turned the question back to him. "And you've always been here?" Ethan nodded. "Born and raised. My dad ran the garage before me. I tried college for a while, but after Lily's mum passed, I came back." The words slipped out before he could think. He rarely mentioned his late wife to strangers, but Isabella didn't flinch. She only said softly, "I'm sorry, Ethan." He shrugged. "Lily was too. It's been me and her ever since." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, an understanding quiet but strong. Over the following weeks, Isabella became part of their small routine. Sometimes she'd drive them into town for ice cream. Other times she'd sit in the garage with a magazine while Ethan worked, humming along to whatever old country station he had on the radio. One Saturday, she and Lily spent the afternoon at the park. Ethan stayed behind to finish a tricky repair job, but when they returned, Lily's cheeks were flushed from laughing, and she was carrying a bright purple kite. "Isabella taught me," she announced. "It stayed up forever." Ethan met Isabella's eyes, and something in him shifted. She wasn't just a fancy car lady anymore. She was someone who made his daughter happy. But not everyone saw it that way. By the end of the month, people in town had started talking. The sight of an out-of-place sports car outside Carter's auto caught attention. A few customers made sly comments, asking if he was dating royalty or about to trade in the wrench for champagne. Ethan brushed it off, but he noticed the sideways looks whenever he and Isabella grabbed coffee at the diner. One evening, as they walked to her car, she said quietly, "People are talking, aren't they?" "They always do," he replied, shrugging. "Doesn't mean it matters." Her eyes searched his face. "It matters to you, though." He didn't answer right away. "I just don't want Lily hearing things that aren't true." The first real crack in their easy rhythm came one Tuesday afternoon. Isabella arrived looking pale, distracted. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. Then after a pause, "It's just complicated." He didn't press her, but he saw the way her hands trembled when she took the coffee he offered. Something about her was different that day, guarded in a way he hadn't seen before. When she left, he watched the taillights disappear, an uneasy feeling settling in his chest. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at his half-finished invoices. Isabella was a mystery. Everything about her, her clothes, her car, the way she carried herself spoke of money, but she never flaunted it. Still, there was no denying she didn't belong in their world, at least not on paper. Part of him wondered what her friends, her real friends, would think if they saw her here sitting on a dusty workbench eating apple fritters. The answer came sooner than he expected. The very next day, a glossy local gossip magazine landed on the counter of the diner. Across the cover, a photo of Isabella leaving Carter's auto, laughing at something Ethan had said. The headline read, "Moretti Heiress, spotted in small-town garage, what's she hiding?" Ethan froze. The name meant nothing to him at first, but the waitress' eyes wide explained in a low voice, Moretti, as in Moretti fashion. They're huge. She's basically fashion royalty. He stared at the photo, the easy smile on her face, and felt his stomach knot. That evening, Isabella came by as usual. He handed her the magazine without a word. She sighed. "I was hoping. This wouldn't happen yet." "So it's true," he said. "It's true," she replied softly. "I didn't want to tell you like this." Ethan didn't know what to say. The gap between their worlds had just stretched wider than he'd ever imagined. Before he could decide how to feel about it, another shadow was about to step into the picture, one that wouldn't just widen the gap, but threaten to push them apart entirely. Ethan didn't have to wait long to meet the shadow. 2 days after the magazine story, a silver luxury sedan pulled up outside Carter's auto. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped out. His hair was artfully slicked back, his cufflinks gleaming even in the weak winter sun. He walked in without knocking, his gaze sweeping the garage with thinly veiled disdain. "You must be Ethan Carter," he said. The tone made Ethan's name sound like a question of quality control. "That's me," Ethan replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm Damien Russo," the man said, offering a handshake Ethan didn't take. "I'm a close friend of Isabella Moretti." The pause before close friend told Ethan everything he needed to know. "I'm here," Damien continued, "to save you from a misunderstanding. Isabella is part of a world you can't possibly imagine. I'm sure you're a decent man, but this arrangement between you two, it's beneath her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's for her to decide." Damien smirked. "People like us, her family, her business partners, we look out for her interests. And we both know your garage and your simple life don't fit in them." Without waiting for a reply, Damien slipped a business card onto the workbench and turned to leave. "Do yourself a favor. Walk away before she gets hurt." That night, Ethan found himself replaying the encounter. He wasn't the type to be rattled by a stranger's arrogance, but Damien's words gnawed at him. He thought of Lily, her small, steady world. He thought of the nights he counted every dollar before paying the bills. And then he thought of Isabella standing on red carpets being photographed in dresses that probably cost more than his yearly rent. Maybe Damien was right. Maybe Ethan was just setting them both up for disappointment. Isabella noticed the change almost immediately. The next time she stopped by, Ethan kept busy, his words shorter than usual. He didn't linger near her or find excuses to stretch their conversations. Lily wasn't there that day, and the garage felt emptier for it. "Did I do something?" Isabella asked, finally setting down the coffee she'd brought. Ethan shook his head. "No." She studied him for a moment. "Then why are you acting like you'd rather I leave?" He leaned on the workbench, avoiding her eyes. "Maybe we've been pretending something could work when it can't." Her expression hardened. "Who told you that?" Was it Damien? When he didn't answer, she let out a sharp breath. "I can't believe you'd let him dictate how you feel about me." "It's not just him," Ethan said quietly. "It's everything. Your world isn't mine, Isabella. And sooner or later, that's going to matter." She stood there, the hum of the garage's fluorescent lights filling the space between them. "It only matters if you decide it does." But when she left, the distance stayed. The following week was the quietest since they'd met. No checkups, no apple fritters, no black sports car in the lot. Ethan tried to throw himself into work, but even the steady rhythm of repairs couldn't erase the absence. Then came the call. It was late evening when the phone rang, and he almost didn't answer. But when he picked up, Isabella's voice was strained, edged with something close to panic. "Ethan, I need your help." "What's wrong?" There was a pause then. "It's the company. Moretti Fashion. Damien's investments. They've gone bad. Really bad. My father's sick. The board is in chaos," and she broke off, her breath shaky. "I don't know what to do." He sat down slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "I'm not a corporate guy, Isabella," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm calling you. You see things differently. You run your business with honesty. You treat people right. That's what we need right now." By the time she arrived at the garage the next morning, her usual composure was frayed. The sports car was gone, replaced by a modest sedan, as if she didn't want to draw attention. She explained everything in detail. Damien had pushed the company into risky expansion plans, cutting corners and alienating long-time suppliers. His schemes had looked profitable on paper, but left the brand vulnerable when the market shifted. Now rumors of bankruptcy were spreading. "The board thinks I'm too young, too inexperienced. They're talking about selling," she said, pacing. "But I can't just let it go. This company is my family's legacy." Ethan listened, arms crossed. "If you're asking me to tell you how to outmaneuver corporate sharks, I can't. But if you want to know how to rebuild trust, how to get people back on your side, that I can help with." Her shoulders loosened just a little. "That's exactly what I want." They spent the afternoon at his kitchen table, Lily doing homework nearby while they sketched out ideas. Ethan talked about sourcing from local artisans, about building relationships with communities instead of just chasing trends. Isabella scribbled notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. At one point, Lily piped up, "You should make clothes that don't rip after one wash. My friend's dress from the mall fell apart." Isabella laughed, but she wrote it down anyway. For the first time since Damien's visit, Ethan felt the tightness in his chest ease. He didn't know where this was headed, but right now they were on the same side. And Damien wasn't going to like that. Damien didn't just dislike that Ethan was involved, he took it personally. 2 days later, Ethan noticed a black SUV idling across the street from the garage. It wasn't the usual delivery van or neighbor's car. The windows were tinted too dark, the engine kept running, and the driver never got out. By the third day, it happened again. Same spot. Different SUV. Ethan didn't mention it to Isabella right away, but he started locking up earlier, making sure Lily never walked home alone from school. He'd seen intimidation tactics before, usually in debt collection or shady contracting work, but he never expected them to show up in his quiet corner of town. Meanwhile, Isabella was fighting her own war. Board meetings grew more hostile. Damien positioned himself as the responsible voice, the one pushing for a quick sale to save the company. Every time Isabella proposed Ethan's ideas, rebuilding supplier trust, producing ethically, Damien dismissed them as naive fantasies. "The market doesn't care about small-town charm," he said with a polite, poisonous smile. "It cares about profits." One evening after another brutal meeting, Isabella showed up at Ethan's apartment with 2 takeout boxes and a tired smile. "They think I'm crazy," she said, setting the food down on his kitchen counter. "You're not crazy," Ethan replied. "You're just not like them." Her eyes softened. "That's what scares them." But the closer they worked together, the more the pressure mounted. The media caught wind of the internal power struggle. Tabloids ran photos of Isabella leaving Carter's auto with headlines like, "Heiress slumming it with grease monkey." Social media trolls called Ethan a gold digger. One afternoon, Lily came home in tears. "Some kids at school said you're dating a princess and she's going to buy us a mansion. Is that true?" Ethan crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No bug. She's just my friend. And some people say things because they don't understand." "But I like her," Lily whispered. "She's nice to me." He smiled faintly. "Me too." Then came the breaking point. Isabella called in the middle of the night. Her voice was tight controlled, but Ethan could hear the fear underneath. "They're holding a vote tomorrow. If Damien wins, the company's gone. Everything my family built, it'll be stripped for parts. What do you need me to do?" She hesitated. "Come with me. I need someone in that room who won't lie to my face." The next morning, Ethan walked into Moretti Fashion's glass and steel headquarters in his only suit, a charcoal jacket he'd worn to his sister's wedding years ago. Heads turned as he followed Isabella into the boardroom, his presence an unspoken challenge. Damien's expression barely flickered, but his voice dripped condescension. "And who's this, your mechanic?" "Yes," Isabella said firmly. "The man who reminded me what this company was supposed to stand for." Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. The meeting was brutal. Damien came armed with financial charts, market forecasts, and veiled insults. Isabella countered with Ethan's plans, reframing them in business terms, but never hiding the heart behind them. When it came time to vote, the room went silent. One by one, hands rose, half for Damien, half for Isabella. The final vote belonged to an older board member who had worked with Isabella's father for decades. He looked from Damien to Ethan, then back to Isabella. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand for her. The motion to sell failed by one vote. Afterward, in the quiet of her office, Isabella turned to Ethan. "I couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head. "You did it yourself. I just reminded you who you were fighting for." For a long moment they stood there, the noise of the city muffled by glass walls. Then she stepped forward close enough for him to feel the faint scent of her perfume. "This fight isn't over," she murmured. "But I want you with me when we finish it." Ethan met her eyes, the tension of the past weeks still humming between them. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Outside, Damien watched from the hallway, his jaw set. He wasn't beaten, not yet. And Ethan knew it. Damien didn't wait long to make his next move. 2 days after the failed vote, Ethan's garage was broken into. Nothing valuable was stolen, at least not in the usual sense. His customer records were gone along with his laptop and the small lockbox where he kept cash deposits for the week. It wasn't a smash and grab. Whoever did it knew exactly what to take to disrupt his business. The police took a report, but Ethan could tell from their shrug that they didn't expect to catch anyone. Lily noticed the tension in his shoulders that night. "Dad, are we in trouble?" He forced a smile. No bug, just someone playing a mean game. But in the back of his mind, he knew exactly whose game it was. Meanwhile, Damien turned up the pressure on Isabella from inside the company. Suppliers suddenly backed out of contracts, citing uncertain leadership. A major investor previously neutral switched to Damien's side. Rumors spread that Isabella was distracted by personal entanglements, implying Ethan was a liability. Her assistant whispered one morning, "They're scheduling a special emergency meeting. Damien's pushing for a motion to remove you as acting CEO entirely." Isabella's jaw tightened. "When?" "Next week." She immediately texted Ethan, "We need to talk tonight." They met at her penthouse, the city skyline glittering outside. She poured coffee instead of wine. It was going to be a long night. "They're coming for my position, Ethan," she said, sliding a stack of documents toward him. "If I'm out, Damien will strip the company in months. We'll lose everything job suppliers, the Moretti name." He skimmed through the papers. "So we stop him before the vote." Her lips curved in a faint, tired smile. "And how do you suggest we do that? This isn't a carburetor you can just fix with a wrench." "No," Ethan said slowly, "but it's still a system, and systems fail when you cut off the bad parts." Over the next few days, they worked in secret. Ethan tapped into old contacts from his time in construction, people who knew how to dig up inconvenient truths. Isabella quietly met with employees Damien had fired or pushed out, gathering testimony. Piece by piece, they built a dossier, a pattern of backroom deals, under-the-table kickbacks, and whispered threats. Enough to not just block his motion, but ruin his credibility entirely. The night before the meeting, Ethan drove home to find Lily sitting on the steps clutching her backpack. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, alarmed. She looked up at him wide-eyed. There was a man across the street, just standing there, watching the house. "He left when he saw me." Ethan's stomach went cold. The next morning, he showed up at Moretti headquarters earlier than planned. He wasn't just there for Isabella anymore. He was there to make sure Damien understood there were lines you didn't cross. When Damien arrived at all smiles and silk, Ethan stepped into his path. "You come near my kid again," he said, voice low and steady, "and I won't just beat you in a boardroom." Damien's smirk faltered for the briefest second before returning. "Careful, mechanic." This is a world you don't understand. Ethan leaned in. Then maybe it's time someone changed the rules. The emergency meeting was tense. Damien presented his motion with practiced charm, making Isabella sound reckless, unfit and distracted. He had allies nodding along, ready to vote. Then Isabella stood. Without raising her voice, she laid out every piece of evidence they had gathered contracts signed in back rooms, shell companies linked to Damien's name testimony from former employees who had been bullied or bribed. Each document landed on the table like a hammer blow. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Damien's allies shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. When the vote came, the motion to remove her failed decisively. Damien didn't just lose. He was instructed to step down from the board pending a full investigation. After the meeting, Isabella found Ethan in the hallway. "It's over," she said, her voice trembling with relief. "For now," Ethan said. "Men like him don't vanish. They wait." She stepped closer, looking into his eyes. "Then we'll be ready when he does." Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. But for Ethan and Isabella, the war they'd been fighting had changed them both. They weren't just allies anymore. They were something more, and neither of them planned on letting go. The days after Damien's downfall should have felt lighter, but for Ethan a quiet unease lingered. Business at the garage picked up customers who'd heard about the man who stood up to the Moretti Empire, came in just to shake his hand. But every time Lily walked to school, he found himself glancing over his shoulder. Isabella kept in touch daily, sending short texts at odd hours. "You should be proud today," or simply "still awake." One Friday evening, she invited him and Lily to dinner at her penthouse. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of the glass elevator. "This is like a movie, Dad." Isabella greeted them in the doorway, wearing a soft cream sweater instead of her usual corporate armor. "Hi, Lily. I hope you're hungry. I cooked." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "You cooked?" She laughed. "Don't sound so suspicious. My grandmother taught me more than just business strategy." Dinner was easy, almost normal. Lily asked about Isabella's travels. Isabella asked about Lily's art projects. For the first time, Ethan saw her walls, not the glass ones in her office, but the invisible ones start to lower. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on the sofa, with a blanket, Isabella poured 2 glasses of wine and joined Ethan on the balcony. The city glittered below wind, soft against their faces. "I don't usually let people into my life like this," she admitted. "But you've been in it from the moment you tightened that alternator bolt." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess I'm hard to shake." She turned toward him, her expression serious. "Ethan, I'm not just grateful, Before she could finish, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and all the warmth drained from her face. Ethan caught the shift immediately. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. "A single text from an unknown number. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Damien, or someone loyal to him," Isabella said, voice low. "The investigation's still ongoing. He has contacts everywhere." Ethan set the phone down. "Then you're not going to face this alone." "Not again." She studied him for a long moment. "That works both ways, Ethan. Protecting me means you and Lily are in the line of fire, too." He looked toward the sleeping girl inside. "Then we make sure no one ever gets that close again." The night ended without another interruption, but the message changed something between them. They weren't just 2 people from different worlds thrown together by chance. They were partners now in more ways than one. And somewhere out there, Damien or whoever had sent that text was waiting to make their next move. It happened 3 nights later. Ethan was locking up the garage when he noticed the shadow across the street, too still, too deliberate. "Dad, hurry," Lily called from inside the truck. He waved, forcing a smile, but his gut twisted. When they reached home, Isabella was already there, pacing the small living room. "I had to get out of the penthouse," she said. Security said someone was watching the building. Before Ethan could reply, a sharp knock rattled the door. He motioned for Isabella to take Lily into the back room, then opened the door halfway. Damien stood there. Gone was the tailored suit. His hair was longer, his jaw unshaven, but his eyes burned with the same venom. "You think you're a hero," Damien hissed. "You embarrassed me in front of my family, cost me my name. I'm here to collect what you owe." Ethan kept his voice steady. I don't owe you a damn thing, and you should leave before you make this worse. Damien smirked. Worse? Oh, I'm just getting started? A voice cut through the tension. You're done, Damien. Isabella stepped forward, her phone in hand, still recording. Behind her, flashing lights approached the distant wail of sirens growing louder. Damien's smile faltered. You called them. I called everyone, she said. The board, the police, even the press. This time the whole city will see what you really are. Ethan moved between them just in case, but Damien only backed away, muttering curses as the police cars pulled up. Within minutes he was in handcuffs, the red and blue lights fading into the night. When the last officer left, the three of them stood in the quiet street. Lily slipped her hand into Isabella's. Are we safe now? She asked. Isabella knelt, meeting her eyes. We are, and I'm not going anywhere, Lily. Ethan looked at her, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. Guess you're stuck with us then. She smiled, one that reached her eyes this time. I wouldn't have it any other way. Weeks later, life began to settle. Isabella split her time between the company and the garage, learning to enjoy coffee in paper cups instead of crystal flutes. Lily started calling her Izzy, and Ethan pretended not to notice the way it made Isabella's heart swell. They had weathered threats, lies, and the weight of two different worlds. But on quiet evenings when the garage smelled of oil and fresh paint and the sound of Lily's laughter filled the air, they knew one thing for certain. Some chance encounters aren't chance at all. They're the start of everything. Sometimes the people we're meant to keep forever arrive when life feels most broken. Ethan thought he was just helping a stranger fix her car. Isabella thought she was just escaping the suffocating walls of her world. But together they fixed something far more important to each other. What about you? Have you ever met someone who changed the course of your life without even trying? Share your story in the comments. And if this one touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story that might just change yours.